What's up guys? Today we're going to be checking out the Reavon UBR-X200 4K Blu-ray player. So with Oppo no longer in the business, this is going to be possibly the next follow-up or successor to that player. So let's go ahead and get this thing unboxed and see what we get inside. Now when you receive this, this will come double boxed. So inside the box we have another accessories box containing the power cord, the remote control, and some batteries. And here is the player itself. Up front we have the power button, the tray, the LED display, open close button, play pause, stop, forward and back, and on the bottom here is a USB input. Around back you have a LAN connection, HDMI 2.0 out, audio output only, USB in, coax and optical outputs, analog output for left and right, also balanced XLR outs, and then you have 7.1 analog outputs, power in, and the main power switch. Size-wise, it measures 17 inches wide by 12 inches deep by 3 inches tall. Also on the bottom, there is a 3mm thick plate, steel plate on the bottom here, which is supposed to keep everything much more rigid, keep noise down, and keep any kind of vibration coming from the disc tray from causing any kind of interference. So lower distortion and better audio quality. Handling the audio, this has got some Burr Brown DACs, the PCM 1690s. It's got a MediaTek MT8581 SoC inside, which is quad core. One important thing which a lot of you guys might be interested in is that this player is a universal player, and it also supports SACD playback. So let's go ahead and get this thing set up in the home theater and we'll check out the AV quality. For setup, I'm going to have this hooked up to Sony 325ES projector, a Sony A9G and 900F televisions. For audio, I'll be pairing it with a Cambridge Audio Edge system and Bowers & Wilkins 805D4s. Once you power on the player, you're going to go through the setup wizard. In this screen, you're going to pick your default language. Choosing your display's resolution is up next. And lastly, you're going to pick your display's aspect ratio. Now you're going to be taken to the home screen. From here, you've got options for disc playback, video playback, music, photos, and here you've got the settings. First option is display. These settings actually look very familiar. They kind of look like the Oppo menus. The first option we have is TV screen, which we chose earlier as 16:9 normal. Next is resolution options. Under HDR, you can choose either auto, on, or off. For Dolby Vision, you've got auto and force on, or you can keep it off. Under audio, we've got digital output as bit streaming, PCM, re-encode, or off. Here's the downmix options. For max frequency, you've got 48, 96, or 192K. Dynamic range compression, auto, on, or off. SACD options. For speaker channel settings, this is applicable if you're going to use the analog outputs on the back of the player. There's 2 up to 7 channels. And speaker test tone will play out of the analog outputs. Under HDMI, we've got HDMI mode as single or separate. This applies to the HDMI outputs on the back of the player. For color space, you've got 420, 422, 444, RGB, or RGB full. Under HDMI deep color, we've got auto, 10-bit, 12-bit, or off. For HDMI audio output, you're going to want to keep this on bitstream for Dolby ATMOS and DTS-X. For CAC control, you've got on or off, and this player does support 3D playback. You've got your network options here, and under language, you've got settings for OSD, audio, subtitle, and menu. For playback controls, you've got angle mark on or off, picture-picture options, secondary audio mark on or off, disc auto playback, last memory, PBC, and lastly, you've got audio watermark level 3. Here we've got the front dimmer, which is either normal, slightly dimmed, or you can turn off the front display totally. Screensaver timeout at either off or up to 3 minutes. Update, which is done through the USB input. Setup navigator. Security, which you can apply a password. And load default and system information. First thing I tried to play back was a 4K folder backup of Scream. Unfortunately, it didn't work. This kind of sucks because this player is based off of an Oppo, so I would have thought that the folder playback was possible so you can get Blu-ray menus and all that. But no luck. Next is a Dolby Vision H265 M2TS file. This is a Dolby Vision video, but unfortunately the Reavon will only play it back as HDR10, so it looks like Dolby Vision from the file doesn't work. On the bright side, Dolby ATMOS does work. Next, I wanted to see if DTS worked with an MKV file. And yes, it worked perfectly fine without any issues. And the last thing I tried playing was a 4K ISO, but I ended up getting an unsupported warning. Just a disclaimer, I'm not a professional calibrator, so I'm only going to tell you the stuff that I can see with my own eyes. That being said, I popped in the color space evaluation from the Spears and Munsell 4K Blu-ray. Since I no longer have an Oppo player, I used the Panasonic UB9000 for comparison. In this particular test, they both look the same to my eyes. They both have got smooth color banding with whatever limitations my display might have had. The biggest thing I noticed between the two is when I put on the scaling HD test. I have the Reavon upscaling the 1080p pattern to 4K, and if you look at the purple circle on the bottom corner, you can see all kinds of artifacts. If you press the resolution button on the remote and change it to direct, it'll output the test in native 1080p resolution, leaving it up to the display to do the upscaling. Now when the TV is doing the upscaling, you don't get any of those artifacts. It's a night and day difference. When I compared it to the Panasonic doing the upscaling, it again is a night and day difference. Putting them side by side, you can see how much smoother and cleaner the Panasonic is. Now when playing back normal 1080p content on the Reavon, I didn't notice anything detrimental to the image, at least none that I could tell, but this test was the biggest difference that I noticed between the two players, and I figured it was a worthwhile mention. While playing back normal content, you can access the playback options by pressing the option button on the remote. From here you can access title, chapter, audio, subtitles, and a few other options. If you press the info button on the remote, this will tell you some basic info, but if you long press the info button, you'll get all the media info like resolution, color space, bitrate, and HDR information. If you want to adjust the image settings, you can access that by pressing the setup button on the remote. It'll give you 3 memory presets to save any changes. There's presets for LCD TV, OLED, projector, and under that you can adjust the brightness, contrast, hue, chroma level, sharpness, DNR, and HDR to SDR level. Image-wise, I played back the 10,000 nit demo on both Dolby Vision and HDR10 off the Spears and Munsell disc. The Dolby Vision version was clearly the best looking of the two. It was a lot brighter and had a ton more punch. The player threw out a fantastic image with every 4K disc I threw at it, and at least to my eyes, it played back just as good as my Panasonic player. Startup is pretty fast too. Once the disc is loaded, it takes about a second or so to get an image on the screen once you hit the play button. It's also very quiet if you have the player out in the open, so you're not going to hear it spinning while playing a movie. Now there is one feature that I really liked on the Oppo that's here on the Reavon as well, which is the ability to stretch the image vertically if you're using an anamorphic lens. There's other stretching options if you want to zoom in to get rid of the black bars, but the thing is, you can only use the zoom feature for file playback and not disc playback. Not sure if this can be added via an update, but I'm sure some folks would appreciate it. To test out the audio, I connected through both the XLR and optical outputs into the Cambridge audio end preamp. Sonically, they sounded identical, which is great. I then went and listened to a couple tracks using the Reavon and then streamed the same tracks over to Tidal. Same thing, I didn't hear a discernible difference, which again is great, because the Cambridge end is one sweet piece of hardware. Now, since there is a volume control on the remote, I figured you can use the Reavon as a preamp and go directly into the amp via XLR. Using this method does work, but you will have to have gain controls on your amp, otherwise the output will be way too loud. And there's also only 10 steps of volume level adjustment, so using this as a preamp isn't such a good idea. As a standalone player though, it sounded great playing back all my discs. At the time of this video, the UBR-X200 is selling for $1,700. It's no doubt a pricey player that's trying to fill the niche that the Oppo 205 left behind. It's also one of those rare players that plays back SACDs and different audio and video files with immersive audio support. I would have liked to have seen Dolby Vision on MKVs, and ISO playback would have made it a more well-rounded universal player, but it is more universal than the Panasonic UB9000, which I think is more of a direct competitor over the Oppo since it's more readily available for purchase. Some folks might hate the fact that there's no streaming apps in the Reavon given the price, but the Oppo didn't have any and the Panasonics are so bad that I'm not even sure why they put them in there. Plus, apps in a Blu-ray player tend to suck anyways. From a usability standpoint, it's a snappy player and is fairly quick while navigating the menus. That said, there were a few times I had the player get stuck while trying to play a disc. Turning it on and off always got things back to normal. Overall, it's a well-built player that can put out fantastic picture quality and it has audiophile chops. If you need a universal player that can play back nearly everything, then the UBR-X200 might be a worthy consideration. What are your thoughts on these new Reavon players compared to the others in the market? Leave a comment down below and let us know. As always guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to like this video if you found it useful and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you again in the next video.